Welcome back to Student Hub Live. We're now going to be talking about undertaking a dissertation in the MA Education and MA Childhood and Youth. And I'm joined by Martin Robb, who's the academic coordinator for the Masters in Childhood and Youth degree. So he's representing that part of the session. Martin's worked on a number of modules in the programme, including this dissertation module E822. And I'm also joined by Alison Fox, who's coming on for a number of sessions today, aren't you, Alison? Alison's designed and taught on the master's programmes in 3 universities and is representing the Masters in Education qualification here in this session. She's the lead for the Learning and Teaching pathway of this MA and is co-chair of the production of the dissertation module. So welcome both. I mean, what a mouthful, this title. I wonder if we could start by unpicking it a little bit. What is the module then for, and what students what can they expect from it?
Okay, shall I take that first? Well,
Yes, please,
I think the clue is in the title, the multidisciplinary title. What we would like to say about this module is it's extremely inclusive, and one of the ways it's inclusive is in terms of its content. It brings together these different degrees, these different pathways. We're representing childhood and youth and learning and teaching today, and it's inclusive in terms of its content. It's inclusive in terms of its students, because it brings together students who've been studying on these separate degrees and separate pathways. And it's inclusive in terms of its kind of flexibility, that we've, as you will hear, the ways in which students can carry out their dissertation. There's a number of different ways in which they can do that, depending on their own needs and their circumstances.
Wonderful. So it's an interdisciplinary module. So what advantages does this give students on the different qualifications?
So can I just clarify when this module's starting, and perhaps for the audience
That would be brilliant,
today,
yes.
and watching it in recorded form as well, that this is a new form of the dissertation module to start in autumn this year for those students who've been moving through modules on the MA Childhood and Youth and MA Education, Learning and Teaching pathway. And then the following year, those students will be joined by students from the Inclusive Practice pathway in education and also the Leadership and Management pathway. So you can see that there'll be a huge umbrella of specialisms and interests and backgrounds of students, and therefore tutors that will be embodied in this module, working together in this module to form support for each of the students carrying out a dissertation of a project that really, really means something to them, their practice, interests, their experience. So we're very excited about it, but it's being rolled out in 2 stages. And so we just need to clarify that there is another dissertation module for the Leadership and Management and Inclusive Practice students for this coming year that is a very established module, and that we've built on and expanded on, really, with the new option that Martin's just mentioned.
Brilliant. That's
If
wonderful.
I can maybe
Thank
answer
you
the
for that.
question.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, go for it, Martin.
No, I was
Go
going
for
to
it,
answer
Martin.
your question, Karen, about the multidisciplinary backgrounds. I mean, certainly for the Masters in Childhood and Youth, all the way through the degree, Stage 1 and Stage 2 modules, we've really stressed the interprofessional nature of the degree. And we think it's a really good thing, a positive thing for students from different professional backgrounds. And, you know, certainly from a child and youth perspective, the degree is very much aimed at people who are working with children and young people, who want to work with children and young people. And we have people studying the degree who are working in the early years. There might be youth workers, there might be teachers, there might be social workers. So it's a positive advantage, I think, for students from those different professional backgrounds to study alongside each other and to learn from each other. I think it's important for their professional practice to understand a little bit about what goes on in different professions and with different age groups of children and young people. And this dissertation module really takes that a further stage by bringing our childhood and youth students together with students who have been studying the education masters. And again, there's a real richness, I think, potentially in all those students studying alongside each other.
And Alison, how is this interdisciplinary aspect reflected then in the MA Education?
Well, I was just going to say that what it's allowed us to do is to really draw on the theories, the the disciplines that are covered within our two sort of fields, broad fields. So we have sociological thinking and key thinkers represented. We've got psychological traditions represented, and I mean, we've seen, as I've worked with Martin and colleagues from the childhood and youth, how much overlap there is in interests in child development, the context, the political world in which children and young people grow up, and people who work with them in education are also coming from a wide range of backgrounds. And as I say, we've got people in leadership positions in educational settings, people who are in governance. We've got a really, really wide range of ages of students represented in our learning and teaching pathway at the moment. You know, from new graduates right through to sort of retired professionals who still want to sort of keep their interest and their knowledge and understanding about how to support educational provision represented. So we've really drawn on the materials and the ideas from the previous units and made them available for everybody.
Sounds fantastic. Kieran, I know some people are here particularly for this session. Are there any specific questions that our audience would like addressed?
There's one about accreditation, and that's from Amber. Amber's interested to know, do the master's degrees in childhood and youth or education provide any professional accreditation for professional bodies and things like that? And I think what she's looking at here is in relation to employment opportunities.
Brilliant. Can either of you answer that for Amber?
Well, I think the answer, certainly from my perspective, I think probably I'm speaking for Martin as well, is no, not directly. But we have, and there's a session on this later today, we have personal development planning absolutely embedded into the qualifications for people to really look for how this master's, not just this module, but the whole master's journey can really feed into employability, whether that's other accreditations, but actually whether the dissertation itself can really make a difference professionally, and that would be whether you were in a practice setting or not. So it isn't directly, but it has the, you know, it has the master's status, which has its own value out in society, in the professional world.
Yeah, that's true of the Masters in Childhood and Youth as well. I mean, we did try to get external accreditation for it, but the trouble is, because of, I suppose it's a downside of being interdisciplinary and interprofessional, we cater for so many different professional groups that, you know, we can't necessarily then accredit it with one particular body, whether that's education, social work or youth work. But we have, our students' feedback is that it's very much an advantage to have this qualification in terms of progressing within your career in all of those professions. And certainly this module, dissertation module, will provide students with research skills, which I think will be useful to them, not just in thinking, you know, do I want to go on and do a PhD or an EdD or become a professional researcher, but I mean, increasingly, professionals working in this sector are asked to use research skills, to be sort of practice researchers, to, you know, to use research evidence in their practice. So I think even without that accreditation, there's a lot of professional and employability value in what we're offering.
Brilliant. Kieran, does that answer your question? And would you like to ask another question?
A useful question, based on what I'm seeing here in the chat box, would be, what is this interdisciplinary master's degree? What are we offering that's so unique? And students should really come and study this one.
Yeah, very good question. So what's unique here, and why should students study?
Go for
well,
it, Alison.
Yeah, well, I was thinking in terms of choosing it, you'd actually choose it the stage before. So all of the students that move into our stage 2 modules would then be choosing their qualification, of which this is the final opportunity to specialise in something unique to yourself and your interest, but to benefit from this multidisciplinary opportunity, space to think, debate, explore, examine, and be supported by people from such a wide range of backgrounds and interests that we've just referred to. But I think something we haven't mentioned yet, it's not unique to this university, but it's the main change that we've made to the dissertation compared to the ones that exist at the moment is that we're offering students 2 options of dissertation. So that you can carry out a small scale investigation in which you carry out sort of data collection in person in a setting, using methods like observation and interviews and questionnaires and collecting documents, and carry out a sort of really ethically value rich study that you've designed to make a difference in some way to the practice, the knowledge about practice in a setting. But we've also offered people this time for this new module the opportunity to spend their time, this sort of rich time and opportunity you have as a university student to explore the digital library and the wealth of literature that you get privileged access to as a university student, that once you get back into your professional world or your practice setting, then all of those subscriptions that you would have to have as an individual, you just don't get access to. Luckily, we're in a world that is becoming increasingly open access, but at the moment, there is a huge volume of international knowledge that you can really use your time as a university student to explore to really answer your own questions. And so we've designed what we're calling an extended literature review, which we're linking to also thinking very theoretically and thinking how theory can be useful. And these really big thinkers in the different disciplines that we've been talking about, sociological thinkers, can help you reflect on what you're reading and what you might have to say about your topic for people in your practice setting. And so as a result of doing this extended literature review and thinking about how theory can help practice, then you design a research proposal. So you don't carry it out during the module, but as Martin was referring to a bit earlier, you are, with a master's qualification, somebody that people will come to and know that you will know about research, and that often you can become a sort of research champion. You can carry out research without, having, a university to sort of hold your hand. We will support you in the research proposal stage. We will check it's ethical. We will help you think through all of the different practicalities, and you will be able to leave the masters ready to carry out a research proposal in practice. When it's ready for you, when it's ready for you and people that you would want to do that with. Now, that might be taking it to further study as doctoral study, or it might be just carrying it out collectively with people that you've identified during your master's module. And I think having those two options of how to spend your dissertation year really give people even more choice about what they want their master's to mean for them.
Brilliant. Thank you. Lots and lots of information in that section. Amber says thank you for answering her question earlier. And Natasha says that it must be very difficult to choose then. I mean, what advice would you give? Because there are 2 formats of the dissertation. So how do students make the right choice?
Shall I come in
Rob,
there?
do you want to think then? I'm like, yes.
So I think it depends. I think what students need to think about is what their coming year is looking like. To look at the year they're going to be studying the module. To think what the pressures are going to be on them professionally and personally, where are the spaces going to be for them to study. So that's one thing. Think about your personal and professional circumstances. Then think about, the setting that you work in or that you're most familiar with as somebody who's working in education or with children and young people. Is it possible? Is it possible to have access to a setting within your work context where you're going to be able to do face-to-face research? Is it going to be difficult to get the ethical approval or ethical permissions within the time frame, and so on? So that might be one. Those practical reasons might help you, for example, to decide it might be easier to go for the extended literature review and proposal. But you might make a more positive choice, just building on what Alison said, that actually you do want to spend this last year just burying yourself or diving deep into the literature on a particular topic that you're interested in. So it's about discovering your own passion, and we say this in the welcome video to the module, that really, in the sort of run up to this module, students can perhaps spend some time reflecting on what they've really enjoyed about their stage 1 and stage 2 study. Has an issue or an interest emerged for them from their previous study that they'd really like to pursue? And then is it more appropriate to pursue that through the literature? Is it a more theoretical thing? You'd like to see what's been written about it? Or can you think of a small scale study, some face-to-face interviewing or other work you can do that would help you to sort of take that passion and that interest further? So I think the module is very flexible. It allows for all those different sort of practical and personal and professional factors to be taken into account. But you also have, I think Alison can sort of add here, you also have the early months and the early weeks of the module in which to make that decision. You don't have to come with that decision fully made. And the module materials in the first half actually help you to do that.
Suzanne wants to know at what point you decide on what to do.
So shall I speak to that?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So there is some support going to be available before you start the module, and those students on the stage 2 modules will get some information about that soon. In fact, there's already some materials, and I know that you've got the link on the Student Hub Live site to the documents and the guidance that you can use to have discussions with gatekeepers in the setting to sort of unpick some of those ethical issues that Martin's just alluded to. So is it going to be easy, feasible? Is it desirable? Are colleagues going to be interested in that setting to support you? So there's all of those materials to look at. And then we're also launching a badged open course about becoming an ethical researcher that will be launched at the beginning of September. And that again gives people the space to think through there's some, if you want to tackle a very sensitive topic, perhaps using the time to actually go and see what everybody else has done around the world around that topic might be a really good use of your time, and that might help you think through, what makes ethical and unethical research decisions. So all of the students will be asked to take that badge course before or in the run up to the start of the course. The decision point, getting to your question, is at TMA 01. So 8 weeks into the course, you will have done this badge course. You will have been working with a specialist tutor through a set of guided materials that take you from your stage 2 mode of study, the content of your study. So we've got sections leading up to TMO1 that have been written by colleagues from your specialism. So Martin and his team have written the materials to take you, to transition you from where you were in stage 2, the modules, the topics that you studied, through to helping you make a decision about the format of the decision, of the dissertation, the topic itself, and starting to think about a question that you really want to answer. And the feedback that you then get from that TMA01 from your tutor will then support you in whether you've made a sort of really strong case for the topic being relevant to your qualification, the question being something feasible that you can tackle either as a investigation or as a literature review and proposal, and their feedback will help you support. And going back to the original question, which is the right answer? There is no right answer. Either of the forms of dissertation are equal in value, they're equal in demand, they're equal in status, and they equally prepare you for further study, whether it's informal or formal. And so it just has to be right for you. And working with your specialist tutor in your tutor group up to TMA1 will allow you that time and space and support to make the decision that's right for you.
Brilliant. So lots of important considerations there for students in terms of the areas they want to cover and whether they want to do something like a small scale investigation or something like an extended proposal. So you've outlined in a lot of different ways that those two sort of key aspects. What would you say are the sort of challenges, I guess, for each one, just thinking about those two methods as methods aside from all the interesting and unique areas of content that students may explore? Any insights that you've got about each approach?
I mean, just to
Should
say
we take one
something.
each?
Yeah, go on then. Choose your favourite.
Go on, Martin, you
I can
start.
flip a coin.
Well, I was going to make a general point about which we haven't said. I mean, again, it goes back to the question about what's unique and special about this master's dissertation compared to maybe others. Students are going to be introduced to a really wide range of research methods and research designs. And we've got this lovely graphic of a pie, and students get a chance to taste different slices. And to listen to real life researchers. We've recorded interviews with lots of different researchers talking about what it's like in practice, rather than just all this theory and the abstract theory of how you do ethnographic research or how you do biographical research. So they get a chance to sort of sample different research methods, whichever they're doing, whether they're going for the proposal or for the small scale investigation. So I guess one of the challenges for students is deciding what suits them. What kind of researcher am I? As I say, they can get some insight into that by listening to, I think we've got 13 newly recorded interviews with researchers around the country, people who've done research all over the world, giving real life stories about the messiness of everyday research, if you like. I think that's really, really helpful in terms of students deciding who they are and where they're coming from. But I'm not quite sure that answers the question about the challenges of the particular one. I guess for the small scale investigation, I would say that the main challenge is that small scaleness. What can I do in the time? You're going to read lots of research papers as part of this dissertation by academics who've maybe been studying a subject for years and doing, funded research projects for 3 years. You've got a year and not all of that in which to do your dissertation. So I think the challenge is finding something that's substantial enough for you to write a significant dissertation about, but it's actually doable within the time. And as Alison said, you'll get a lot of support from your specialist tutor in helping you to focus on that.
Well, we asked people at home what areas they might be interested in looking at. And I imagine that many people at the beginning of their journey may not have huge number of ideas. But let's see what people at home said when we asked about some of the things that they might look at in a small scale study. So homeschooling is the thing that's coming up most prominently here. Technology, and I think we've all had so many experiences of homeschooling recently, some good, some not so good. Children's learning, diagnostic teaching, questioning, sports science, preschool, colour assessment, history, technology, work of Senko. So lots of very varied and different ideas here. How appropriate might some of those ideas be? I mean, I appreciate it's just a word, Rob, but are those sort of representative of the diverse interests that students have?
Alison,
Absolutely, I certainly recognise I recognise quite a few of those coming from certainly what we know of our students' backgrounds, but also from the materials as well. So that's obviously some of the readings from previous modules might have excited people to explore something, or that they're just really students are wanting to apply the ideas to their own context. And we've already got people who are quite experienced in homeschooling in our student body, and so obviously now homeschooling has now been opened up to people who were never expecting to be involved with it. So that's the module offers a real opportunity for people to get together and to apply in real time their thinking, their reading, their academic thinking about these things to real practice situations. And so I'm not surprised by any of those topics, and they're all included and possible to explore. I think going back to one of the points that we just made earlier about that first section of the module, the first 8 weeks, is that it's really making sure that the question that you focus in on, as Martin's just said, needs to be small scale enough and feasible enough, but it also needs to tie in to your named qualification. So that's why we're working in specialisms for the first 8 weeks before you move and work with everybody else, to make sure that you're thinking about a project that will be related to the sort of principles of childhood and youth or educational research, and haven't sort of drifted into the sort of wider questions that many of us, always become tempted by, and it becomes very, and I know I'm thinking of students on the dissertation modules at the moment. They say if you're not crystal clear, if you haven't really got a practical handle on your question, then when you move into what becomes an increasingly sort of independent part of the module, thinking about the challenges, when you are studying your own dissertation, where you have a design that's different to everybody else's, and therefore you're working very individually with your tutor, the clearer you are about that focus, the design, and how it's going to be carried out, and it hasn't drifted into something that could be anything, then the better. And that needs to be decided as early as possible in the module.
Yeah, no,
And
absolutely.
I think
I mean,
that's,
it brings me back to that point about, homeschooling we talk about very, very broadly. And in fact, a colleague, Amber's coming along later to talk specifically about the differences. But, it's very, I'm very mindful that, we sort of have words that we sort of bandy around. And of course, home education is very different to homeschooling. And so it's important, particularly for small scale studies, to be very, very specific. And while things can become huge issues, they can be very conflated with other things. And so I guess one of the things students may be mindful of is being very specific, as you say, about their research question, about the scope and scale for something that is a relatively short period of time for a postgraduate piece of research.
Because
Okay.
one thing we just need to emphasize is that actually if you're doing the small scale investigation, with the data collection window is a particular part of the year. And going back to one of Martin's earlier points, it is a case of having a look at your whole year, having a look at the study calendar, having a look at when you could start data collection, which can only be after ethical approval from your tutor. Actually, it's at the second TMA point. Actually, in that window, where are you in your life professionally? What have you got access to in that particular time? And is it, the sort of people, places, spaces that you need to answer this particular question? And that's why we need to be thinking about it much earlier in the module.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. Well, thank you very, very much both for filling us in. We've covered, I think, nearly everything. So I'm just going to ask Martin for your final tip, because Alison, you've mentioned quite a few that were on our list of tips to discuss. So Martin, what might be your top tip then for students thinking specifically about this dissertation?
Well, I would go back to what I said earlier, is if you're thinking you're doing this dissertation module and you've got some time now, do think about, what are you really passionate about? What are you really interested in? What's really excited you about the previous modules you've been studying? Or even, going back to the previous interview with Naomi, what excited you when you were doing your undergraduate degree in childhood and youth studies, for example? And then think about maybe, does that lend itself to a small scale investigation, or do I really want to get deep into the literature on that? But, think about what you're passionate about and think about where you can make a difference. Is there something that will make a difference to the area where you work and that you can achieve in a year? Because that could be a really sort of satisfying result to end your 3 years of master's study.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Martin and Alison. That's been a really, really interesting session. Lots there for people to consider, but also, as you say, lots and lots of support and space to make the right decision and to work with your tutor around a specific area and focus that is right for each and individual student. So thank you very much for that. Well, we're now going to have a short video break. We've got some interviews from other colleagues from the faculty to show you, and we'll be back live on air at 12:35. So we've got some more excellent content for you this afternoon. So do stay tuned, keep chatting, and we'll see you back for more live sessions very, very soon. Don't forget to grab some lunch though, and bye for now.